Amazing. All right. Well, we only have 30 minutes today. As people pop in, they'll also get the recording. If you're here already, yes, you will get a copy of this recording as well as the download. And today we're going to be talking about creating a compliance blueprint. And our guest and also the leader at the Compliance Alliance around compliance operations strategy is Jessica Hobbs. Jessica, we're really excited to hear what you have to say today. So take it ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. And thank you, Lynn, for providing this space for us to chat about my favorite topic. All right. We do have a short window, so I'm going to jump right in. Here's our agenda for today. So we are going to talk about the SOP categories. That's our standard operating procedures, self-audit areas, audit frequency, action plan for compliance, and we will do some key takeaways. I promise at the end, I'm going to say this to start with. I know it's a short time. There's a lot to say, so I am going to go through the slides fairly quickly, but at the end, you are getting a fantastic takeaway with the information and a guide for your own compliance blueprint journey. All right. So I'm going to start out with what an SOP is. I think that that's one of those, buzzwords that we hear in the corporate world. And I think sometimes we all may have a different vision of what we think an SOP is. So just to align us, I went, where does everybody go when you want to know something? You go to AI, right? So I went ahead and got AI's definition so that we're all aligned. And AI says a standard operating procedure is a documented set of step-by-step instructions that outlines how to perform a specific task or process within an organization. SOPs are designed to ensure consistency, efficiency, and compliance with regulatory requirements by providing clear guidelines for employees to follow. So hopefully we're all aligned with what we're talking about when we talk about a standard operating procedure. So let's take a look on your slide. Are the excuse me. I am going to take one moment. There we go. Are the SOP categories. These are the categories in which you want to have standard operating procedures for your school, or if you own more than one school, for your organization. There's 6 categories: classroom health and safety, playground health and safety, staff files. We want procedures both for onboarding those staff files and for maintenance of those staff files. Child files, same thing, onboarding and maintenance. Licensing documentation, we need procedures to maintain that. And then, very importantly, we need some procedures for compliance auditing, right? So I know that there's just 6 topics here, and I am aware that there is a lot of meat under each of those topics. So when we start to think about a standard operating procedure, let's just say under classroom health and safety, we're talking about things like, where do teachers place their personal belongings? What is the procedure for your campus or for your organization? Hand washing, medication storage and administration. And those are just to name a few. Yes, there's a lot of meat under each of those categories when you're thinking about creating them. So my question for you just to think about as we walk through this is, do you have written SOPs for these 6 categories? Is it comprehensive enough? Are your staff trained on the standard operating procedures that you have written? When are they trained? Is it in their first day, first 30 days? Are they retrained? Do you review those annually, semi-annually, or through maybe during your meetings once a month? Are those SOPs centrally located where your staff can find them and refer to them? Do they refer to them? Or do they always ask you as the leader? And when you observe your staff and provide feedback, do you refer to those written SOPs in the feedback? Or do you kind of forget them too? And I'm saying this because we do all have a tendency to leave that out. But one of the key things is that consistency and clarification for your staff, making it clear as to what the expectations are. So let's talk about the essential parts of an SOP. And I have seen these written in a variety of ways. And so I'm going to talk about, the really crucial parts into making an SOP successful in your organization. How many of you, I don't know if maybe I can see in the chat, you could put in the chat, or you don't even have to respond, but just think about it. Have you heard the words, because that's our policy? I'm pretty sure we've all heard that. Even if it wasn't within our own organization, we've been somewhere where we had a question and they said, well, because that's our policy. So the big takeaway that I want you to get today, if you do not remember anything else from this 30 minutes, there's 2 things I would love for you to remember about a standard operating procedure. Number 1, it should provide a why. Why do we do this? Why is this procedure in place? I think we all know if we're operating from a why, it's also something we can relate to and remember. But if it's just a procedure and there's only those steps, it's hard for people to remember. So the big takeaway, number 1, is you have to have a why. And then number 2, a standard operating procedure is a living document. So because that's our policy, because it's been that way for 20 years, no, we don't want to say those things. It should be a living document. Hence, if you look at the very top of this slide, I need everybody, if you're like me, you need a visual. So here's our visual of a standard operating procedure. And at the top in blue has an edit date and a reason for the edit. The expectation is that it may change, right? And that we are evaluating. So let's go through those pieces. The first says our approach. That's where the first gold circle is. And that could be labeled your objective, or objective approach, but that's your why. Right out of the gate, we need a reason for doing this. Everybody needs a reason, right? So be sure and provide them with that why. The next part are those procedures. I think that when I think of standard operating procedures, that's what I think of. I think steps 1 through 5. I just need to be sure to do those. I think that's the easy part to write because you know what your expectations are. So that's in there. That's your procedures. And the next, since we're in the world of licensing and early childhood education, we all know the word corrective action plan. We hear that a lot. So this is somewhat the same thing. So think of it like your staff has these procedures, and they followed it, but they got to step 3, and step 3 didn't make complete sense in the situation, and they maybe needed to make a judgment call. And that's okay. Sometimes we have to do that, right? But at that point, they should go to their leader, or if you're a director, maybe you're going to your owner or regional manager, and let's say, let's take a look at this. We had this situation. Maybe that does warrant editing this standard operating procedure. Hence, it's a living document, right? So that's one way in which we may edit the procedure. The next is training. Training on that SOP. Who needs to be trained? How often do they need to be trained, and when do they need to be trained? So having that training in there and giving us something to be accountable for, that's important. And then the last thing you'll see is the routine evaluation of the SOP. So the leaders, whomever that may be, it may be an owner, it may be a director of operations, a regional director, but there needs to be someone who has that on their calendar to take a look at these annually, right? Do they still make sense for the school? Do they still make sense for the organization? Is it meeting the organization's needs or the school's needs? And then another piece of that is, does it even meet regulatory requirements? Because we know that regulatory requirements change. And are your SOPs changing as regulatory requirements change? Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. Because sometimes they sit, sometimes they sit in a policy manual, and we forget, if we don't really have that calendared, we forget to take a look at those, and maybe we need to reevaluate and update them. There we go. All right. So I told you we were going to move fast. In the first 15 minutes, we've already created our whole list of comprehensive standard operating procedures, right? We have clear standard operating procedures, SOPs. The next thing is how are we going to ensure staff are practicing the procedures and referencing the procedures when they have questions? Audits. Auditing. Lots of people do not like that word, auditing. So you can label it whatever you choose. It may be a review, quality assurance, but I'm going to use auditing because we all know that word. And that's how we're going to ensure that those SOPs are actually being implemented. Now, if you do not have an audit system, you may be thinking, remind you, I've been in your shoes. You may be thinking, who is going to complete these audits? Right? And how often do I need to audit? And if you do already have audits in place, I'm asking you, do your audits refer to your SOPs? Are SOPs referenced when providing audit feedback to the staff? These two are interconnected. SOPs and audits. One cannot exist effectively without the other. So the goal, is to establish a consistent framework, right? That fosters a culture of compliance and accountability within the organization. So if we have this type of framework, it does become more than just a foundation. And I use that a lot, that compliance is such a foundation for a school. But really and truly, we want it to be more than just that foundation. We really want it to weave throughout the organization. That's what's going to make it successful. And it should manifest. It should manifest in daily supervision reviews, in people consistently referencing the SOPs, your staff. When they have a question, they are referencing those SOPs. You also begin to adopt a shared compliance language. Everyone is speaking from the same set of kind of rules, right? And the use of the audits and the SOPs can really serve as benchmarks for staff feedback and evaluation. The audit categories, just to take a quick look at those self-audit areas that I have listed, I have supervision, health and safety, staff files and child files, and licensing documentation. And again, yes, there's quite a bit of meat underneath all of those areas. But if we break it down to 4 main areas, those are the main areas that we need to check out at our campuses, that we need to know what's happening on a daily basis, that we need to have some type of pulse on, right? All right, so I talked about, in the previous slide, I did say, I posed a couple of questions, and one was, who completes those audits? And 2 was, how often? So taking a look at this slide, supervision's at the top, and it says daily. And I know that that might seem like a lot, right? But supervision is one of the highest risk situations that schools face. From the literal health and safety of the child, that's number one, and first and foremost, but to then your licensing status, then your reputation. And we know from being in the business that one major supervision issue can have a domino effect in an organization, right? So while this is a recommendation, these right here on the slide, they're standard recommendations from us, but supervision should be checked daily. That's a director doing their walkthrough and recording that. Now, frequency is dependent on several factors. Your organizational structure, so maybe it's just an owner and a director, and you guys have to find ways to manage these audits, but maybe it's regional manager. Maybe they're, splitting that between the directors doing a few, the regional managers doing a few, the district managers doing some different types of audits. So organizational structure does affect, the frequency. Licensing status affects the frequency. Let's just say a campus is on probation, right? We probably need to be auditing that campus a little more than we would a campus who has who's in good status and good standing with licensing. If you're an organization who acquires other schools, after that acquisition, that can be a tough time in which one organization is trying to learn what another organization was doing and then trying to come together on that. So there may be more audits at that point to even get a baseline understanding, baseline data as to where the campus is. That's important to know. We need to know where to start, right? And then one other big one that stands out, there's several situations, but one other big one is director turnover. So turnover within a school leadership, that warrants audits, definitely, right? We need to know probably go in and create another baseline. Hey, let's do a comprehensive audit. Let's find out where this school is. And so now we know, do we have any corrective actions? Maybe we do before that next leadership comes in. All right, 6-step action plan for compliance. Number 1, we talked about we're going to clarify and streamline those standard operating procedures. That means we are going to create clear and concise steps that are easily understood by your staff. So they shouldn't be complex. I do want to say that. They shouldn't be too complex. They need to be easily understood and also remembered by staff. Number 2, training and awareness. Create and provide comprehensive training for your staff on the SOPs, on the importance of SOPs and compliance. And then once that's completed, make it readily available to them so that they can reference those SOPs. And then reminder, we all sort of forget as we move along. So there needs to be some type of review during the year. Number 3, create and implement compliance audits. Number 4, establish risk ranking for audits. I'm going to talk about that briefly in the next slide. Establish audit ownership and frequency. Who's going to do it and when are they going to do it? And is it on the calendar? And then number 6, huge, evaluate and adjust. Now if you have audits, you should have data. So that data means that you can evaluate and adjust SOPs, training, staffing possibly, and maybe even your audit practices. Might need to adjust that frequency and the ownership. All right, here's a quick snippet of an audit, right? Here's a compliance audit sample. This is classroom health and safety audit. And you can take a look on the left. You have the topics that you're going to audit. You see needs attention, high and low in red, and then satisfactory. So I'm going to taking a look at the high and low. That is a risk factor that I want to talk about. So I'm going to give you a quick example of how all topics might not carry the same weight when it comes to risk, right? So if I have a checklist and I'm just using a checklist, let's say, and it has 10 items on it, I go into a classroom, I do this observation. I check off 9, right? 1, no, didn't have that, right? So I got a 9 out of 10. And that makes me 90%. I got 90%, right? It's an A. It's an A. But what if that one item that was missing was the highest risk item out of the 10? You did not get an A. right? I did not get an A at all. That one item might have held more weight when it comes to risk than any other item on that list. So it is important that you are not just going through a checklist, but you are weighing the risks of the items on the checklist. That also comes to training. Are your staff trained to even understand what high risk and low risk are? Because they're busy. I know this. They're busy during the day and they may have to prioritize certain things. And we want them or directors or even regional managers prioritizing those high risk items. All right. So quick takeaways. Consistency is crucial. Consistency in our SOPs, what they look like, how they're presented. Consistency in audits. Are they occurring regularly? Are we using the data regularly? Training is essential. None of this happens without the training of those SOPs. Evaluate regularly. That means evaluating through audits, but it also means evaluating the SOPs. Do they even make sense anymore? And then you can look through the advantages. If we are doing all of these things, if we have those SOPs in place and we have that audit system in place, we're prepared for licensing. We have improved health and safety for the children. We have clear protocols that everyone in the organization can follow. We begin to have a positive compliance culture rather than a policing, scared, negative culture. And all of that is going to equal increased parent and staff satisfaction, which rolls down to enrollment. And we know that domino effect. Right. I am pushing my time limits here. So over here, we do have a QR code. If this seems like a lot and you are like, yes, I do want this, I do want to be able to sleep at night, but I might need a little bit of support, scan that QR code, give us a call, and we can support that. And then I also have the takeaway today. And Lynn, I am not sure how to get that takeaway.
I've dropped it in the chat.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, there it is. There it is. There it is. Okay.
It's in the chat.
So Lynn provided you with the takeaway today. I don't know if I can make that bigger, but I can go over, I'm just going to go over it really fast. So hopefully you were able to open it.
Jessica, here's what I'm going to do. If you want to share, I'll pull it up in a bigger
that would be great.
Share. And
do I need to stop sharing?
yes.
There.
And let's see if I have the right one. Here we go. Are you seeing my screen now in a PDF?
Now I do. Yes. Perfect.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. So let me move this over here. So the beginning of this is just some self-reflection questions, because if you're thinking about creating a compliance strategy, of which I hope you are, or you've already been in the process of creating this, these are just some questions to really think about that process. You know, where are you now? What do you want to even achieve with this, right? How do you want this to play out? What do you want your staff? How do you want them to view this? Can you scroll up just a little bit? There you go. Yes. Okay. And one of the big things is that data piece. The data piece is going to guide you, like I said, in your future processes, in your SOPs, in training, and all different areas of the organization. So it has to be recorded, and we have to decide how that's going to be recorded. You know, are you going to record it on a spreadsheet? Are you going to use something like One Place to to record this in, Power BI, things like that? And then, thinking through those obstacles that you might face in trying to implement such a system. We know how beneficial it can be in the long run, how much smoother our organizations can run and give you a little peace of mind when you go to sleep at night. But there can be some obstacles to get there. So being aware of those obstacles and planning ahead for that. The SOP categories that I discussed are listed right there. That's your mainframe right there, your framework to know what types of SOPs need to be created for your organization. Self-audit areas. There's a few self-audit areas right there. Those are the main categories. You would need to create the audit for each category, and then there needs to be an owner. There needs to be a cadence. So we need to definitely schedule that. And then the last page, I did provide a very short licensing documentation checklist that has, the one that you could use just a paper copy of even to go through. And this is just for your licensing documentation. Do you have these things? What's high risk, low risk? Or are you satisfactory in all areas, which would be great. All right, I've gone over for 3 minutes. I think that was pretty good. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Jessica, before we wrap up here,
Yes.
I want to dispel one myth that is a takeaway, I think, for whether you're here in person or you're listening to the replay. When you hear, well, we just follow what the licensing guidelines are, is that an adequate SOP?
It is not. It is not, because let's think about that. When I went through the pieces of an SOP, it has to have some meaning, some why. Regulations don't. Regulations are a statement. This is our rule. This is just the rule, right? Within an organization, you need the approach. You need to revisit it. Also, a regulation can be a little bit, have some gray area. And you might not want that gray area in your organization. So you might need to tighten it up as to what you actually want those procedures, how you want those procedures to play out within your organization.
Yep.
No, it doesn't work just to drop those on the wall or post them up on the wall.
Exactly. Well, thank you for clearing that up. So thank you so much for giving us that rocket ship tour of a compliance blueprint. It is a lot, but these power half hours intended to be, here's the framework which you provided, and then a takeaway, some homework where participants can go back and kind of do reflection of where they are on this journey, where they might have some gaps. And a great takeaway. So thank you, Jessica, for your time today. And thank you for those that participated and are listening to the replay. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everyone.